Hello, friends. Today is the first of August, 2021, and I'm continuing with Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, Section 1. And Part 4, Video Commentary. Now, we've been working on the 10 seed groups. We've looked at the telepathic communicators, the trained observers, the magnetic healers, and also the educators of the New Age. No sense to go back over those because they're in their own separated categories. But we can now go ahead to the political observers, political organizers. I guess it calls it that, not observers, sorry. Political organizers, which will concern itself with the political factors in every nation. And there are so many esotericists, may I say, that don't have a particular interest in politics, but DK says, well, why? Because it does condition so very many people. I know from my own experience, I didn't pay much attention to politics, and then I went to work at the Arcane School back in 1980, and people were there in the headquarters office were acutely interested in the political situation, and I learned how important it was, because really so many millions are affected by it. Now, we're on page 38, I believe, and we'll see, whether we can finish this or whether it will take 2 programs to do what remains. So Master DK goes on, they will work in the world of human government, dealing with the problems of civilization, and with the relationship existing between nations. They are not necessarily in the Department of Civilization, which is the 3rd department under the sway of the Mahachohan, but he is somehow very connected, and he's deeply connected with Master Moria, who is an inspiration for statesmen in this 5th field. So certainly the present relationship between nations is not especially good. There are blocks of nations, maybe, who think similarly, but there are also those very blocks can be antagonistic towards each other. And we certainly need a human race in which the international groupings of nations are not antagonistic towards each other. But that will require the rising of selflessness in the public. And we are still, because of the degree, or let's say insufficiency of evolutionary experience, we still have much unconscious selfishness abiding. The people who are selfish don't say to themselves, well, I am selfish or I am not. They don't even think in those terms. But in the last analysis, they have a great deal of selfishness, of self-concern, and are personality centered. Okay, DK goes on. The bringing about of international understanding will be their major objective. Now let me insert the idea that a book like The Destiny of the Nations certainly assists with international understanding, because rays are given, astrologically conditioning factors are given in some detail. Now, the book is naturally incomplete, having been written pretty much in the 1940s before a huge number of nations came to birth. But still, it gives the idea of how one nation should think in relation to other nations. And because the book tells us about the good that can emerge in any particular nation, it helps people of goodwill and true servers to foster that goodness, and of course the beauty and the truth also that can emerge from any nation. So next we have DK going ahead. This group communicates, and let me pause to say, we are considering Roman numeral number 2, methods of communication. What did we have in the very beginning? What we had was the founding of focal points of energy, at least a creation of inlets for certain energies which can flow into the entire race of human beings, and then the new techniques in work and in modes of communication. That's what we're working on now when we examine the 10 C groups. All right. Yeah. This is, so repeating now what Master DK has said, this group communicates, and note the coming phrase, the quality of imposition. Now, may I say, usually that is a word which suggests a kind of autocratic, negative, commanding position, and Master DK has said that he does not work with the quality of imposition, and he has implied that no master really does work with the quality of imposition. Though sometimes when you see what Master Moria has said and how he says it, you do begin to wonder whether he does not consider imposition quite a legitimate means of relating to his chelas and groups. So repeating again, this group communicates the, quote, quality of imposition, and, let us say, through law and its enforcement, and going on here, and an authority that is lacking in the other branches of this divine group activity. Now, may I say, he's looking at these 10 seed groups as examples of divine group activity. So the authoritative approach, the enunciating of what individuals and groups, communities, and nations must do to abide with the law is emanating from this particular group. So repeating here, it's communicating, quote, an authority that is lacking in the other branches of this divine group activity. Going on then, this work is largely first-ray work. It will embody the method whereby the divine will works out in the consciousness of races and nations. And members of this group will have much first-ray energy in their equipment. Now I'm thinking of the three individuals, or at least two of them are coming to mind. And I think two of them were closely associated with DK, and maybe were receiving letters from him. They both had a lot of first ray. One was it Francesco or Francis Bruhala in Argentina? He was a first ray soul, and was the other named Madeline Doty. And she did receive communication. She had a strong combination of Ray 1 and apparently Ray 6, but she didn't really respond. I'm forgetting who the third individual was, and whether that individual was receiving communications from DK via Alice Bailey. Anyway, first ray work is here involved. And when you study, let's say, the people in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, let's say, of the United States, we do find a lot of first-rate people. So it seems, even though the idealism of the personality ray of the United States, the sixth ray, is quite prominent. So, it's not a guarantee that the first ray will be strong just because a person is elected to the Senate or to the House of Representatives, but there is a kind of probability. All right, we go on here with what DK is saying. Their work is to act as channels of communication. Now there's that word again, because we're dealing with new modes of work and methods of communication. So repeating what he's saying here. Their work is to act as channels of communication between the department of the Manu and the race of men. It is a noble task, my brothers, to be channels for the will of God. So Master DK is dignifying or pointing out the dignity of this group of workers. And of course, there are a lot of beneficent changes which are due in this field. I might say a lot of house cleaning is due before the Christ can actually find it safe to reappear. Not safety to himself, but safety to humanity in general. So here is the group of then political organizers. And I'll have to remember that. I'm so frequently forgetting that word, organizers. I sometimes say political workers or something to that effect, but it shows that there is a lot of organizational ability on the seventh ray as well. Now, if I'm looking here, I don't know if I can find it. Let's see, where would it be? Yeah, it would maybe be here under D and AAB diagrams, and different charts are shown. Now, I know you're not seeing right now what I'm looking at, but you will in a moment. And here we go. And I'll try to get this here for you. Let's see, political organizers. I see what I've done now. I've been talking and I've not had it recorded. I just want to note here that the Manu and the seventh ray unnamed Chohan have a direct red line to them, and Master M, who's involved in this political organization, has a direct line to the Maha Chohan. Master M is connected with the supervising third ray master, and that master is connected with that organizer, that seventh ray Chohan, whose name has not been given. So I just want to say it's important to see who is related to whom. And these things will mean a lot more to us when we are of that grade where we're working at that particular level, you'll notice that in these connections, some of them are really extensive. And by the way, I just noticed, of course, that Master DK is connected with the Manu, with Master M, but in this case, not with Master Jupiter, who is connected to a European master. So it's interesting to see where the lines begin and the lines end. This looks like a tangle of interlocking lines, but it is not just drawn in any way. It's drawn in a manner indicative of certain relationships. I'm hoping that this time I did record it properly. And just to repeat that, study the charts, study the charts. Now, so that ought to be enough regarding political organizers. As I've said, I often forget the word organizers. I say political workers, but it shows that first ray, seventh ray connection. And further than that, it is understood that seventh ray souls, seventh ray is a ray of attributes, resolve onto the first ray, unless by special dispensation, as was engineered by Master Viscount Master Rakosi, when he became Mahachohan. A special movement was instituted, quite a logical movement, I think, whereby the seventh ray was, and its workers under his supervision were transferred to the third ray, the third ray of aspect. And I think they had to be of a certain caliber to be transferred that way. That caliber being, I think, at least probationary initiates of the second degree. That strikes me as correct. So if this particular group of political organizers becomes really effective, it will mean that the usual selfish political shenanigans, isn't that a great word? Such an Irish word, shenanigan, will be subdued, and we'll have a much less selfish body politic. Okay, so that was going to be the fifth group of political organizers, number 5. Now, the next group has the distinction of having the same rays or the same centers in utilization as the trained observers. So there's a direct connection there between the workers in the field of religion, the workers, we might say, with the New World religion, and the trained observers. They just have some kind of similarity, which we have to ferret out. I think the head center, heart center, and solar plexus, something like that. Now, going on with DK, what does he say? their work is to formulate the universal platform of the New World religion. It is a work of loving synthesis, may I add, in a very fractious field where criticism and cruelty and division and inquisitions have held sway. So repeating, it is a work of loving synthesis, and it will emphasize the unity and the fellowship of the Spirit. I guess once we begin to tune in on the level of soul and even beyond, we recognize, as we did not before, that there is a unity in the major principles of these religions, and therefore there should be a fellowship, well, under the name of, or whatever you call him, the great head of the hierarchy, the Christ, who is the dominating figure in the hierarchy and in all religious matters. So it is a work of loving synthesis, the Tibetan says. We don't see much of it yet, do we? And going on, and it will emphasize the unity and the fellowship of the Spirit. Just pause for a moment and think about that. The Spirit really is the monad, and although at first we don't have the way of truly accessing the awareness or the experience of the monad, it is behind all the kinds of higher contacts that we might be able to begin making. I have a friend who collected the instances of the golden rule as found in all the major world religions. Really, the wording might be just a little different, but the principle is the same. So there is no real logical basis for dividing religion from religion. And may I say that when the more scientific, evocative, New World religion comes into increasing awareness, there will be less and less tendency to divide one religion from another, and towards that we work. DK goes on to say this group is, in a pronounced sense, a channel for the activity of the second ray of love wisdom, that of the world teacher, an office held at present by the Christ. And I think we can note that it was not always held by the Christ, nor will it be. Master Kuthumi, in the age of Capricorn, which is still more than 2,000 years off, will be holding the position of world teacher, and the Buddha once held it, and well, who knows, before the time of the Buddha. I have gathered that the Buddha began holding that office around the year 3000 BC, at the time of the incarnational death of Krishna, one of the early incarnations of the Christ. Krishna Maitreyi, the Christ. I think that's a line of incarnations. And two of them, note, were found in relation to India. So the way the New World religion is supposed to be expressed is via the great second ray, the synthetic ray of love, wisdom. And I think it's that ray too. I mean, ray also, which makes of the trained observers such good observers. I think the trained observers have to have a lot of the second ray. Certainly they have a lot of the heart center activity. Now, DK goes on to say, the platform of the New World religion will be built by many groups working under the inspiration of the Christ and the influence of the second ray, and these in their totality will constitute this sixth group. Now, may we note that, as usual, the numbers 2 and 6 are connected. He does advise us, he says, you pay so much attention to the relationship between 2 and 6, but you ought to be paying attention also to the relationship between 2 and 5. And when you think about the work of Master Hilarion and Master Jesus, then the relationship between 6 and 5 has to be considered. So it's not, may we say, it's not just up to one group alone to build the foundation for the New World religion. You can see that cyclic scientists will also have to be involved, and that Aquarius, which has so much to do with the science of cycles, will offer a golden opportunity in the next age to think of the cyclic evocatory structure of the New World religion. And the Christ, who will be with us in more visible person, will be the inspiration for all of this, and he will be accepted in a more general way under perhaps a variety of names, so that let's just say that the Jew or the Islamic practitioner will not have to think of himself as a Christian, because he will find the Christ under a different name. And so will the practitioner in India who follows Krishna. I was young enough to witness the devotional upsurging of the so-called Hare Krishna movement, and even the Taoist and the practitioner of Taoism in the Far East will find a way to find the Christ. I'm thinking about that right now, and I know that the name Christ can be off-putting to the practitioners of some religions until they understand that it is a particular method of naming that great individual whom they recognize under another name. So the particular name chosen will not make as much difference as the recognition of the identity of that particular individual. All of this will be a development, I would say, in the new age. I want to say the sense of time can be very extended. When we think that there are trillions of years and more remaining for the elapsing of our universe, not only objectively, but subjectively, then we find that our sense of time has to be altered if we can possibly do it. So this is really just a brief description of something very, very important. Now, let us remember the danger of the found within the religious field, that if the next war is fought, it will involve Shambhala, and it will be a religious war. So we have a lot to get through before we can begin to fulfill the promise of the kind of New World religion which is indicated here in this sixth of the seed groups. Now, at this time, we study all these different groups, and maybe we have not made our choice or have not had indicated to us what our choice should be. But I will say that the students of Master DK seem to be very interested in this field as they carry on the full moon and new moon work. I would say, that some involvement in the telepathic communicators, then the trained observers and the magnetic healers and the educators are all frequently found indications of his students, and then maybe not so much the political workers, but certainly the workers in the field of religion, and maybe not so much the scientific servers, but then going on to group 8, the workers in the field of psychology, however DK describes it, not so much maybe in the field of economics, but then a 27 or 3 from each one of the groups is gathered together in the group of creative workers, which is number 10. But first things first, I would say, and we have to learn which of these groups calls to us most pronouncedly, and even from the inside of our life, which of these groups is indicated for our participation, because it's pretty clear that we will be serving along the line of one of the groups here listed. This is not the entire range of service, not the entire gamut, but it does cover a great deal. Okay, we're making progress. These are just indications, aren't they? They are focal points of energy through which a great flow will eventually occur for the redemption of humanity. Now, here is one of those groups, very important, that the students of DK, not many of them being fifth-ray souls or even fifth-ray personalities, will not so readily work within. But anyway, it's called here, the seventh group is that of the scientific servers. Now that's something I want to remember. Political organizers, number 5, and scientific servers, number 7. And they, it says DK, they will reveal the essential spirituality of all scientific work, which is motivated by love of humanity and its welfare. Now, I want to pause there for a second, saying that from other planets have come egos whose egoic lotuses are very partially opened, and they oftentimes need the stimulus of the second petal, which is basically a love petal within the knowledge tier, and they can, a tier of petals, and they can receive that here on Earth, because that love of humanity and its welfare is gathered through the various love petals. The love petal of the in the hall of ignorance, in the within the knowledge petals, the love petal within the hall of learning, and the love sacrifice petal, which is well, it's bordering on the hall of wisdom. It's the sacrifice petals. So anyway, repeating here what DK says, they will reveal the essential spirituality of all scientific work. And may I say, that has not been widely enough realized. And what we have here is especially the scientific work, which is motivated by love of humanity and its welfare. More and more in the combination of 2 and 5, 5 and 2, the scientific work will be motivated by the love of humanity and its welfare. Already we can see what science has done to assist people. I'm thinking, well, you know, there's so many examples, all the way from finding cures to deadly diseases. I'm thinking of even very fifth ray scientific apparatus, such as made the life of Stephen Hawking possible, so that his internal nature could reach us, whereas otherwise he would have simply been paralyzed and unable to communicate. There's some kind of connection between him and Newton, which is pretty strong. And when you look at his horoscope, you see some real karmic problems in the 12th house, in a sign that can indicate this muscular degeneration which he experienced. So anyway, the kind of scientific work which is motivated by love of humanity and its welfare is going to be revealed by the seventh group here and its development, and then going on with decay, which relates science and religion. May I pause and say, just as is the case with the Master Jesus and Master Hilarion, so which relates science and religion and brings to light the glory of God through the medium of his tangible work and his tangible world and his works. I mean, we may be, may I say, looking for the one who is hidden by the garment of God, but also the glory of that hidden one is revealed in the outward world and works. So we cannot forget that, and the day will come when the whole idea of glorification of the outer form is revealed through the assistance of science. In other words, pursuing, shall we say, transfiguration in a scientific manner. And particularly those, I mean, every ray type can and will become transfigured. And the fifth ray types will have a distinctly scientific method of doing that, or what we would call a scientific method. So the outer form of God, our planetary logos, is to be appreciated, and it does reveal the glory of God. Going on with decay, they have a most interesting function, but one which will not become evident for a long time, not until the building forces of the universe are better understood. And may I add there, the building forces, of course, are the Devic forces. And we're heading for a time when the Deva kingdom will be much, much better understood, because this is the age of the emergent Deva evolution. This is the time when humanity, moving into the fifth kingdom of nature, is placed in a position to understand far more than heretofore of the function of the Devas. So this interesting function, let's see what it is. And this will be coincident with the development of etheric vision. He tells us this is coming, etheric vision, because of changes in the ethers and changes in the function simply of the eye. And I imagine, because the seventh ray will be much more involved in building the racial form, that seventh ray is connected with the ether and with etheric vision, and will reveal through the increased sensitivity which the seventh ray will institute. It will reveal what is present all the time as the higher aspects of the physical nature, that is, the etheric nature. All this, may I say, we have to look forward to, and we are laying the groundwork for its emergence. Going on with decay, this group will act as a channel of communication or intermediary between the energies which constitute the forces which construct the forms. Now, isn't that interesting? The energies which constitute the forces which construct the forms and fabricate the outer garment of deity and the human spirits, the outer garment of the human spirits. So the group will connect energies and forces and will reveal, let us say, the modus operandi of the fabrication of the outer garment of God. Now, may I add that fifth-ray types can become so engrossed by their interest in the outer garment of God that they forget the one who stands behind. And in some of the old commentary sections, it says, well, you can value the outer garment, but please know me, the one who stands behind the garment of God. Okay, going on. You will note here, consequently, the possibility that this group's main initial work will be, and this can be surprising, with the problem of reincarnation. That problem deals with the taking of an outer garment or form under the law of rebirth. So reincarnation, let me say, has to be proven to the materialistic and rather skeptical mind of the majority of human beings. Well, the group here, intermediary between that which intends to incarnate and the vehicle used to incarnate, will help to prove the factuality not only of survival of the death of the physical body, but the taking again of a new vehicle. We can therefore understand why among the Christ's teachings for the new age, a reincarnation is such an important one. In the book, The Reappearance of the Christ, it tells us what the Christ will teach, and quite differently from what happened before, except that teaching of this nature was given to the inner circle. The Christ did not at that time emphasize reincarnation. Maybe he wanted to avoid the result that presented itself in the East, where people basically believing in reincarnation just felt they had all the time in the world to make good, and therefore did not follow with any degree of real pressing forward their own spiritual development. They became, shall we say, too passive. So here the seventh group of the scientific servers, and interestingly enough, number 7 suggests the outer plane, and they are concerned with showing how the inner takes a vehicle on the outer, reincarnation being a prime example of this. And unless they really do their work well, humanity will remain in a state of agnosticism, meaning, well, we just don't know, we just don't know. But it's going to be very important that humanity does know and behaves accordingly. There are so many things we would do or not do if we were convinced that reincarnation was a fact. Think about your own life for a moment, and what would you do that you have not done, and what would you not do what you have done? And I just want to say, I really think our behavior would be a lot better if we were convinced of the factuality of reincarnation. But when we take this to people who just don't believe in it because they're still so lower ego centered, we have to be careful how we present the subject. And if we can find instances in their own teaching which seem to corroborate the idea, so much the better. At least in Christianity, there is that, as Alice Bailey tells us, by regarding a question from the disciples to the initiate Jesus, or probably it was at the time the presence of the Christ using the body of Jesus. And the question was, who has sinned, this man or his fathers, that he was born, now note, that he was born blind? So that is an implication which should not be refused, and it's right there in the Bible. There's action before birth. And I think a lot of Christians consider it an inconvenient question, or tie themselves in knots trying to answer it in such a way that the conclusion is not reincarnation, but some other thing. We have the idea that the sins of the fathers are visited upon the sons, even unto the whatever generation, fifth, sixth, seventh generation. And that may be true of some factors regarding heredity, but it's also true that man makes his own bed, so to speak, by his behavior before the next birth, and then has to deal with the karmic consequences. So we can see, I think, how important this group really is, and how much human welfare will be advanced once it is accepted that the scientific methods can be used to render the quality of life far more spiritual. It may be a while, though, before the function of this group with respect to reincarnation is in full swing. Really, it reminds us of how ignorant we are about the process. It is, a magical process, about the process by which the inner energies and tendencies and oneself as an entity become externalized. So externalization here, and the means of externalization, is an important point. All right, now the next group is very interesting to theosophists and the academically inclined, because the way the word psychology is used is not quite the same as its use in the popular terminology. These psychologists will form this next group, and they will be concerned with the revelation of the fact of the soul, the fact of the soul, and with the new psychology, which would be based on the 7-ray types and the new esoteric astrology. Well, in a way, you can certainly see how Master DK and his work has contributed to the emergence of this kind of psychology, because he is the great expert on the 7 rays and on esoteric astrology, and he has brought these sciences to our very considered attention. But there's more to it, because remember, when it comes to healing, some of those actions that lead to psychological healing are found in the group of magnetic healers, who don't have to have the same kind of academic knowledge as this particular group. DK goes on, their major task will be to relate through approved techniques, and may I say, we're not yet sure of what those techniques may be, but anyway, through approved techniques, the soul and the personality, leading to the revelation of divinity through the medium of humanity. So let me say that in bringing soul and personality together, they will have a major function. And maybe DK has already given us some of these techniques without announcing what he was doing. Also going on, they will act also as transmitters of illumination between groups of thinkers, and as, well, that would mean, wouldn't it, that the groups of thinkers, because of working with approved psychological techniques, will understand each other better. So repeating here, they will act also as transmitters of illumination between groups of thinkers and as illuminators of group thought. So would they not have to know the rays and astrology of the groups that they want to relate in a field of greater light. They transmit energy, says the Tibetan, from one thought center to another, and above everything else, they transmit the energy of ideas. So right away, we get the impression that these psychologists, through the building of the Antakarana, have learned to work on that level where ideas are generated, namely the Buddhic plane. And when you think about how the Hydra is defeated, there's a certain psychological understanding that arises when kneeling takes place and the wrong use of energy through the Hydra is really, really understood. Above everything else, he says, they transmit the energy of ideas. So let's just say these groups come to understand each other far more completely than before, and they see the good and they see the tendencies which lead to difficulty, and they are in a position to emphasize the good because of the work the psychologists are doing. Well, think of it for a moment. You take on an understanding of a group and you try to convey to that group the way your particular group sees things. And sometimes you are effective and other times rebuffed, but increasingly light will flow between the various groups. And the animating ideas behind each group will be recognized. So these psychologists really are revealing what is presently hidden, the divinity behind the functioning of various groups and nations. Actually, if you look at the book, The Destiny of the Nations, a lot of esoteric psychology is being used. It's international, national, and international esoteric approach to psychology. The world of ideas is a world of dynamic force centers, says DK. Let this not be forgotten. These ideas have to be contacted and noted, and their energy has to be assimilated and transmitted. Well, we have to know what are the motivating factors behind our group work and behind the group work of other groups. And the psychologists are so astute in detecting the energies which are animating the different groups. So we can see, can we not, through his 2 volumes in A Treatise on the 7 Rays, the volumes of esoteric psychology, how much Master DK has helped this type of service emerge. One day, the fact of the soul will be proven. Maybe if France deserves it, it will be through France, and it will involve, as we have noted, the sign Pisces and the fifth ray, which is the soul ray of France. And a truly scientific, esoteric psychology will gain currency in the thought of humanity. Well, still, there's a lot to be revealed here. Somewhere, this group number 8 is taken up for further examination, and it says the people are of a more academic persuasion. The academic theosophists and Bailey people. I certainly, myself, I feel very drawn to this group for obvious reasons involving the rays and astrology and a general wielding of ideational energy. And maybe you can determine in your own case whether you feel affiliated in this manner. There'll be more to say here, but just to understand that the psychologists are esoteric psychologists, and they're not just necessarily therapists. The therapy aspect of all this is coming under the group of magnetic healers who have to use esoteric psychological techniques, but as I've said, are not necessarily of such a rigorous academic persuasion. Through the work of this group, number 8, we might say that divinity can get through into the psyche of man and onto the outer plane. And thinking about the world of ideas and what it represents and where it's found, we can probably learn a lot about this particular group. Each ideational center being distinguished by a particular type of energy. Now here is another group, 9. Interesting, I must say that the cyclic number of the third ray, which has so much to do with finance, is the number 9. So this 9th group will be composed of financiers and economists. Now they are playing a very important role in the emergence of the Aquarian age. And we're told somewhere that a group of first ray initiates on the 7th ray will rethink and redo the entire financial system and make it far less selfish than at present is the case. So many people, think it's quite okay to have the ambition to corner the market and to gouge other people and even basically rob them of the means of acquiring the necessities of life. But the age of Aquarius is also the age of distribution, when the divine circulatory flow will be established in a truer manner. So anyway, this group, says the Tibetan, they will work with the energies and forces which express themselves through the interchange and the values of commerce. I would add here then that Mercury is involved, being in a way the god of exchange, and also Scorpio, of which Mercury is the highest ruler. Going on with DK, they will deal with the law of supply and demand, and I'll pause for a minute and say that that immediately makes Jupiter connected to this group. With Jupiter ruling, we understand when we study the kind of school that's on Jupiter, Jupiter being connected with the law of supply. So repeating then from DK, they will deal with the law of supply and demand and with the great principle of sharing, which ever governs divine purpose. Well, okay. What have we learned about sharing? Something really important, namely that the Christ cannot think about reemerging into visibility unless the principle of sharing is at least somewhat controlling national and international affairs. So on a little microcosmic level, we can judge of the degree to which we actually share. And I might add that sharing is not the same necessarily as the third-rate, sixth-rate tendency to impose one's ideas upon others. Sharing judges of the need, and then with love and magnetism tries to meet that need. It's quite different than saying, I know you don't listen to me, and I'll tell you what to do by sharing my ideas, whether or not you want to listen. Okay, of this group, says Tibetan, they will be the great psychometrical workers. Now that's a suddenly very occult statement. Psychometry puts us somehow in touch with different objects, both gross and subtle, and tells us of their history and their significance, their indications. They will be the great psychometrical workers. For a psychometrist is one whose soul is sensitive to the soul in others and in all forms of life. Now, let's see here. So maybe some additional sensitivity is found here, which one might not expect, but the anima mundi, the soul of the world, this group is in close touch with it. So the soul significance of that which is touched either in an outward way or a more subtle way is in the position of this group. Now, we're just beginning to work in this way, but you can see in some of the young people who have inherited great wealth that they are differently motivated than their parents who gave them that wealth, and they feel the obligation to pay back and to distribute. I'm just thinking about, two recent divorces, one of which left Melinda Gates divorced, and the other left Bezos' wife divorced. I'm trying to think of her name right now, but it's an unusual name. It escaped me. But anyway, they are looking at what their billions and billions of dollars granted to them in the divorce settlements can do for humanity. And they seem altogether rather selfless, which is a very good sign when it comes to those who are controlling great wealth. On the other hand, there are those with much less wealth, those significant amounts of it, who are blatantly selfish and self-serving. Okay, so this principle of sharing has stated that Christ cannot return to greater visibility without the enactment of this principle of sharing, at least to a point that he alone will recognize. And with that, peace and house cleaning, which we see beginning to emerge, are also requirements. DK goes on to say the principle of sharing, which must govern economic relations in the future, is a soul quality or energy, and hence their work of relating soul to soul. As I say, they are attuned to the great soul of the world, the anima mundi, and maybe are as at home dealing with the soul of humanity as with the soul of other forms of life. I once saw a demonstration by the psychic Peter Hirkos. He was a laboring man who fell off a ladder, and he hit his head, and he kind of awoke from that accident with the psychometric ability, and certain psychic faculties awakened. And in this demonstration, he would ask people to put in a tray an object that was meaningful to them, and he would tell something about them by using the object to attune with their psyche. All these things are possible and emergent. I think, was it Master Moria who said, if you're looking for the transfiguration, you will find it scattered among the many abilities distributed in different members of the human race. Maybe one person doesn't have it all, but the collection of possibilities demonstrates the nature of transfiguration once these abilities are collected and found in various advanced individuals. And then a little more here about them. They also evoke the soul of the past. Well, look, the third ray, to which they are so closely related, is the ray of history, and the seventh ray too, to which I think they are closely related, makes sure that we understand what has transpired in the past. So DK says they also evoke the soul of the past, linking it with the present and finding it likewise indicative of the future. Well, if you're like I am, you find a lot of obscure statements in this brief description of group number 9. You know, they're not just people who, as it were, put up the money so things can get done. There's a lot more to do with feeling out the soul of things and the soul of different forms of life and relating those soul demonstrations to each other. I think this requires a lot of pondering. I certainly know that if there's a group about which I understand the least, it's probably this one. So a study of psychometry is really, really needed. And we might find, you know, that we look at the various subplanes of the lower, let's say, 21 subplanes, and we find certain abilities connected with any of the subplanes. For instance, I think planetary psychometry is one of them, and then a lower form of psychometry earlier, and so forth. The people who work here probably have activation on those sub levels. More about that will be revealed when we can actually see the degree of activation on the subplanes and in relation to psychological development of individuals. And then finally, as far as this list is concerned, this is the group of creative workers. Now, remember that this group has 27 members, and it kind of suggests the advanced esoteric schools in which the advanced school has 24 students and 3 supervising teachers or esotericists or practical occultists. So 3 group members are taken from each of the other groups and combined in this group of creative workers. And we do notice, don't we, that constantly this term communicators is used, because that's the section we are dealing with. Roman numeral 2 and new modes of work and of communication. So DK says, they are communicators between the third aspect of divinity, the creative aspect. Now remember, the will to create is coming in under Aries, and the will to fulfillment under Leo, and the will which conquers death under Capricorn, three great first ray signs which involve different types of will. So when we talk about the great creative aspect, Aries is involved. So repeating what DK has said, they are communicators between the third aspect of divinity, the creative aspect, as it expresses itself through the creative work and in response to the thought world. And the first aspect, life. Now, none of these are easy statements, and we just really have to ponder. Aries, interestingly, is connected with as the first sign with the life aspect and brings in more of the first ray, and under it is studied the science of being, but also is connected with the will to create, which makes it a kind of representative of both the first and the third aspects. So repeating here, they are communicators between the third aspect of divinity, the creative aspect, as it expresses itself through creative work and in response to the thought world. And the first aspect. So what shall be created, we might ask? When life impresses itself and reaches an agent of the creative aspect, what is it that is brought forward through creativity? DK goes on to say, they link and blend life and form creatively. Now, to me, that sounds very magical, like a definition of what magic is, the linking and the blending of life, which is, essential being, and form, so that the form can, through creativity, express different aspects of the life energy. It is, to me anyway, a magical group. DK goes on, they are closely related to the ninth group. And let me say that makes sense, Going on, he says, because today, unknowingly and without any true understanding, they are bringing about the concretization of the energy of desire. Through desire, we seem to want the appearance of certain things, certain factors, things we would like to see emerge. So DK says further, this in its turn brings about the creation of things. So the creation of things through desire is part of the work of this group. DK has talked about the overproduction of things, and interestingly, and maybe strangely, he relates it to the concretizing fifth ray, as if to say, if we didn't really have the fifth ray functioning the way it is, this multitude of things would not be so evident. And of course, that multitude can clog the perception and the ability to act in line with the plan. So in the ninth group, we have to find the means of gathering the resources to make things appear. And the creative process is part of making, and let us hope, intended things appear. It's also possible to just make a lot of stuff appear. And you might say to yourself, in seeing this stuff, of what earthly good is it? It's just a proliferation of things that tend to get in the way. Incidentally, therefore, they are concerned with the concretization of money. And well, that's pretty much the case with the ninth group as well. The work of that group and this group is more towards the magical arts than any of the other groups, we might say. But naturally, they are assisted by the scientific servers who can help to convey an idea of what techniques to be used. I think we do see the relationship between the word technique and technical. Going on with DK, their work is also largely philosophical. So, may I say, quite a range here, and going on with DK, and concerned with the task of relating factually and scientifically the other 9 types of groups so that they may work creatively, may I say, together, and thus, cooperatively, so that they may work creatively upon the physical plane, and the divine plan may clearly appear as the result of the synthesis that they bring about. So they think, how should these 9 groups be related? How can they assist each other? And by gathering 3 from each one of the previous 9, they provide the circumstance under which 27 can work together cooperatively, bringing about creative precipitation of that which the plan intends. I might say that we shouldn't just jump at the chance and say, oh, well, I obviously belong to group number 10, because it's much more likely that we belong to one of the foregoing groups, and only then might be chosen or might choose to participate in group number 10. Now, I would say there's a lot more to extract from these descriptions than I have been able to pull forth from them, and we need to learn how to ponder to get the full value, the full understanding of how the groups actually work and how they interrelate. But notice we start with telepathic communicators. We start very high with the reception of great ideas from the high planes and the translating of those ideas into thoughts from a very high mental level, and we work it all the way down rather magically until those thoughts become actualities on the etheric physical plane. So basically, we're involved in quite an effective magical process, especially once the groups are rightly formed, which is hardly yet the case. Even the foundational experiment had to be temporarily discontinued and is up for further enhancement, I would say, over the next nearly 200 years. Now, we have dealt with the first two Roman numerals. We have dealt with let's see if I can even find it. Yeah. I should be able to get this. Yeah, Roman numeral number 1, an experiment in founding or starting, and that's all it is so far, focal points of energy in the human family, and through which certain energies can flow into the entire race of men. And then also an experiment in new techniques of work and in modes of communication. So we have thus far finished 2 of these Roman numerals. And the last description was quite elaborate, dealing with 10 groups. And it would not hurt, I would say, to think about the group that calls to us most strongly. Elsewhere, I think in externalization of the hierarchy, further things are said about these groups, and some of the things that I hear mentioned are filled in. If I were to, look at all this for my own particular case, I probably at this time would choose the group of psychologists, also based on what is said from the externalization of the hierarchy, where it describes something further about these groups. So basically, we have stopped at Roman numeral number 3, and we're finishing program 19 and getting ourselves ready for program 20. And we'll have more about the groups in the next program. And this one has been done on the 1st of August in the year 2021. And we have gone, I think, from page 38 to 40. Now that's about how we're proceeding 2 or 3 pages at a time. And we'll pick up then with program 20. And we'll be hearing about the chakras that are involved with each one of the groups. So this is Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 1, Section 1, Part 4, Video Commentary. And we're beginning on page 40. As much as I would like to go on, you never know. Sometimes one just runs out of steam and then cannot grasp as acutely what is meant to be grasped. So this next section 3 deals with the chakras applicable to each group, and then section 4 is the last one, and it's very short. So maybe the next program will deal with both section 3 and section 4. It would be from page 40 to 43, which seems doable. And we would enter into part 5 of this work. So much is in the mind of Master DK, and he wants to impart to us as much of it as he can that is assimilable and applicable by us, and which can enhance our meditation. We're around page 40. This whole section takes us to page 102. So we can see that, well, what can we see? We're a bit more than a third done with this particular introduction. Many people have said to me, well, yes, I have read this and maybe more than once, but it requires some pretty deep pondering before the full spiritual value can be revealed and assimilated. So just think for a moment what you may have absorbed by studying these new techniques of work and modes of communication as they are found in the 10 seed groups. And to the extent that it is directing your service forward and filling the content of your consciousness with additional light, it's all to the good. And I do want to say, remember that these groups are not just cut and dried with powerful and uncrossable lines of distinction between them. There is a lot of interpenetration and overlap, and what I would call mutual enhancement. So there's not a group listed here that could not in some way be brought in to assist a different group or groups. It's a condition of complete interdependence. Well, I think that's an important point to remember. Whatever group we choose as relevant to ourselves, it can be aided and abetted, enhanced, and somehow strengthened by certain abilities, certain tendencies, energies, let's say, from the other groups. Well, okay, friends, we wish you lots of love and many blessings from Tuya and me and the whole communications team, BL and Joe and Michael Stacy and Michael Crow and others who are involved with it, although less frequently perhaps. And this will be on Makara, this will be on YouTube, and I'll get out, I sent it out in two ways. I mean, BL sends it out basically with the text and a little image at the top somewhere. And I send it out with a bigger image and at least some of the words which I use. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of mistakes depending on how I pronounce things and whether the library which formulates the words is familiar enough with the word I use to get it correctly, but you will have the idea. So on then to program 20, which will take us, I hope, to part 5 from page 40 to 43. The last little bit is of part 4 is very short. So we'll be seeing you before long, and study hard and apply it to your meditation and find a way to work out at least some of the things DK indicates when attempting to help others. We'll see you now.